All right, well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the most attended of these bootcamp series, so I'm excited to see that. We're talking today about how to make CSA shares financially accessible. And so here we go. Today we're going to do some quick introductions from me. You have introduced yourself some in the chat. Feel free to continue doing that. We're going to talk very briefly about why you might want to do this. The bulk of today's workshop or today's conversation will be about methods for improving accessibility. We'll talk a tiny bit about marketing, and then there'll be time for discussion and questions. So for those of you who have been here for all of these, this will be a little bit of a repeat, but just to give you some broad strokes about us. I am Kara. I use she, her pronouns. I live in New York. I work for Farm Generations Cooperative. I have many years as a CSA farmer and working on other CSA farms under my belt. I also I work on technical assistance and support for Farm Generations Cooperative. Farm Generations is a multi-stakeholder agricultural cooperative. So we have always had farmer owners as part of our cooperative. Now sometimes employees can join to be co-owners also. And the thing that we have built thus far is GrownBy, which is a sales platform that empowers local farmers to sell directly to consumers. This project, so one of the things that's awesome about GrownBy is that it's a cooperative, and that means that we don't have like big investors, like big venture capital investors, which can be fantastic. We don't have to ever pay them back or answer to them in any way, but how we have received a lot of funding is through the USDA. So that's great. This project that we are talking about today, or sort of this CSA project that has built the materials that we're presenting today, was funded by the Farmers Market Promotion Program the last 2 years. There are a number of different sort of outputs, to use some grant speak, from this project, including some recorded workshops on CSA best practices with farmers. You can see that on our YouTube page. There is a corresponding handbook. Some of this material is from that, although we'll go a little bit deeper. There's also a survey report assessing the needs of CSA in New York City specifically. And then through this project, we also added some new great features to GrownBy that are specific to CSA farmers, a little bit specific to CSA in New York City. And so we're constantly evolving GrownBy to have new tools to help farmers, lots of different kinds of farmers. The scope of this project, this grant, was about New York City CSAs, but the information in it is, I think, applicable to CSAs across the country. And so this workshop, like today's workshop, will not be New York City specific. So that's good to know. To move on to like diving a little bit into the financial accessibility pieces, I think one of the first parts of this that can be really helpful is to just ask yourself as a farm, why? Like, how and why is this important to you? So we definitely see farms that have financial accessibility written into the farm's mission. That could be a main driver of why someone is farming, how they are farming, where they are farming, all of those things. It could be that the farm is in a community that they really want to just serve and represent and make sure that their membership is representative of the community where they're based. So that could be a reason that a farm is looking to improve the sort of accessibility pieces. It could be that, for that last bullet point, that this is a focus of the membership, right? That your membership is like, this is really important to us, or your core group, to use some New York City speak, to make sure that like that those community members might want to drive this forward. And that can be awesome. It means that you have partners in this project, and I think that can be really helpful. And the last piece that could be a why is that, and this is like a little salesier, right, is that sometimes financial accessibility pieces can really add new members and generate revenue for the farm. Anna Moran from Just Food sort of talked a little bit about this, that if you're not financially accessible to big pieces of the community where you have your CSA, you could be really leaving some sales on the table and making it harder for other folks to access and to shop from you. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And I also want to back up a second to say, I know there are a number of nonprofits or sort of farmer technical support folks on this call, but to the farmers, I think this can be a little bit of a complicated piece. And I think starting small and starting basic is kind of a helpful way to get your foot into building out a more financially accessible share, thinking about these things from the beginning. But there'll be a lot of things we talk about today that might seem like, whoa, that's kind of a lot. So I hope you are not overwhelmed by this, and just sort of take it in and think like, okay, this could be a 10-year project to improve the financial accessibility of our farm, not necessarily a thing we need to do right now in year 1.5 or something. Then I think if you don't have all of the details worked out, just having some pretty basic language about like contact us if you need financial assistance can be helpful. And more on that, to just consider your capacity. So I've listed these in terms of like roughly lower effort to higher effort. And we'll go through each of these strategies a little bit. This isn't super formal, right? Sometimes accepting SNAP might be really easy, but sometimes it might seem a little harder depending on the farm and the capacity of the farm. So we're going to go through these different strategies in that like rough order of maybe most easy to most complicated. So the easiest and maybe one of the most classic ways to make a CSA more affordable is just through payment plans. So it's pretty classic. It's a simple way for all members to pay. We see weekly or monthly. In GrownBy, we support monthly or weekly installments. And this is, especially if you're going to offer weekly installments, like definitely software makes that so much easier. Keeping track of all of those checks or Venmos or anything else can be a real headache. So definitely software makes that a lot less painful. Classically, farms have encouraged payment prior to the start of harvest, right? So they might have said, we take 3 installment payments, one in February, one in March, and one in April. And then our distributions start in June. That is something we classically saw sort of in the New York area, but there are lots of different ways to do it. On the other hand, like payment plans are great because they do stretch that payment out over time, but it doesn't actually change the share price. So it doesn't change the bottom line of how much your share is costing. So it can make it more accessible to people, but not necessarily any cheaper. There's another option that we see lots of farms kind of incorporate early on that is just a lower income share. And that could be that the farm has an area on their website that says, contact us if you need financial assistance, contact us for information about our lower cost share. In GrownBy, you can really easily use a promo code to lessen the cost of a share for just one customer. So if just one person is like, oh, hey, I need this, and you chat with them and you're like, great, you can make their share less expensive, or you can make it more affordable. Is the more salesy way to say that, right? These lower income options, they can sometimes be directly linked to your donations. So you might take donations and use those to kind of create a fund that you that you use to, here, somebody wants in, let me help this person. Oh, that worked. That you use to make the lower income shares more affordable to people. This can be incredibly flexible for the farm, right? The farm can offer as many of these lower income shares as they can handle, as they take in, like they can see the number of donations coming in and then make that number of shares available. It can also be that the farm can be very flexible with the customer. So the customer says, I can only pay this much, and the farm can kind of make the share cost whatever that customer needs. The farm can, if they are taking donations or they have funding from some other source, they can really know exactly how many shares they can offer or exactly how much they can discount things. One of the cons of this is that members have to ask directly for that financial assistance, which can be like awkward. It's like both a task, and like all of us probably know that we have busy to-do lists, and some tasks are harder to do than others, especially ones that feel really uncomfortable or awkward, like calling somebody and asking for a lower cost share. They also may not know whether or not they qualify. So I think people on the edges can feel like, oh, I don't know, maybe I should leave it for somebody else who needs it more or something like that. And you might just be missing out on helping folks that you would love to be providing a discount for. And again, some farms allow members to say, I would like to pay, you know, I would buy this share for $200, or I would buy this share for $400. So that makes it especially flexible for the customer if the customer is able and comfortable saying that. Donations can be a core way of funding any of these financially accessible models that we'll talk about. Certainly that sort of super flexible lower income share. Donations can come from your existing members, from other supporters of the farm who may not be members. They could come from nonprofit partners. Maybe you have a distribution location at a YMCA, and the YMCA says, we would love to make 5 shares more affordable for community members or something like that. Online platforms, again, like GrownBy, can make it really easy to just add a donation to your sales channel. So you can just set up an option, a standing option for customers to donate in whatever amount you can set the amounts, or your customers can kind of choose. And so you can collect money there and be able to pretty easily sort that and see it and make sure that it, stays directed towards financial accessibility. Donations can also be connected to tiered pricing, which we'll talk about next. So it can be for kind of in any direction. Donations to a regular farm, to just LLC, are not tax deductible if you're a traditional business like that. But that doesn't mean you can't take them, right? You just can't offer a tax deduction for customers. That's not hardcore financial advice from Kara Fravor or from GrownBy. That's just like what I have found from searching around. So if you need to know more about that, you should talk to somebody more more knowledgeable about tax law than me. But we see lots of regular businesses taking donations to make shares more affordable. So I think that's pretty helpful. You can also have a sort of event or a fundraiser that is specific to bringing in donations. That's a bigger lift. That's a heavier lift for a farm to do, but certainly is, a thing we see happen in some places. You can also encourage donations at other events. So if you have a potluck or you have a farm tour or a harvest party, you could sort of set out an old school box and say, we would love your help funding our fund, our lower income share fund, or making our shares more accessible to community members. And I think it is sometimes helpful to frame it as a fund. It just is like language that I think can make this it's clear to the donator that it's going exactly what your shares are, or what their donation is going towards. And then this is a little bit like a little bit more into these strategies. There are two strategies that I'm going to talk about here. We'll talk about payment tiers or tiered pricing, and then we'll also talk about sliding scale. And those phrases are sometimes used interchangeably, but I want to make a little bit of a distinction, maybe a distinction that's only in my head, but that I think is sort of helpful. So payment tiers are when a farm offers multiple different options for payment. So they might be high income, low income, and middle income. And we see farms offering this for sure. Also in New York City, we sometimes see this managed by the core groups themselves. So the farm might say, like, this is our share, these are our shares, and the core group might say, okay, we're going to offer a number of different tiers. It's really helpful when doing this to provide guidance to members to help them select the tier where they belong. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then the customer self-selects the tier that reflects them. It could be that the guidance is very income specific. So you might say for families under $70,000, for families over $100,000 or something like that. And then the customer self-selects. The farmer can also balance the number of shares at each level to keep that membership equitable, right? So the farmer could say, oh, it seems like we've been selling a lot of higher income shares. We're going to close that for a little while and let things balance out a little bit. Again, these payment tiers can be directly supported by, it shouldn't say discounts. It should say donations, the other D word. But so this is a place where those donations could make the lower income tiers priced more affordably. One of the things about this is that some farms just call this high income, middle income, low income shares. Like they might just name it like that. That's like very clear for the customer what they're looking at. Some farms might call it contributor, supporter, member, solidarity, or something to just to be a little bit respectful to folks who fall into those different levels and how they feel about the experience of whatever income level they're in. I find that, it's just something to think about as you build out payment tiers. If you're building out payment tiers, to sort of think like, which of these names are forward facing and where are these names going to be seen for how that experience is going to feel for members. In GrownBy, we also have like a nesting feature, a templates feature. So at checkout, a customer could say, oh, I'm going to be I'm a high income member, or I'm a supporting member, or whatever. But that at distribution, the sign-in sheet just says like one vegetable share. So everybody's kind of like put together, and there is not necessarily obvious to everyone what tier any given member is in. And then sliding scales, which are a little bit more advanced than a basic tier. So this would use those tiers, but control them a little bit more tightly. Sliding scales build a real relationship between the price points and the tiers. So I'm giving this example, which is a little mathy, which is why I made an icon of a calculator here, because I had to break one out to do this math, right? But that the farm might decide, okay, our shares should cost $800. That's what we think the value of this share is. And we're going to go for 100 members. And so that should be exactly $80,000 in farm sales. And then the farm could say, like, all right, we'll make our middle income shares $800 and we can aim to have 50 of those. How many high income shares do we want to have? Maybe 30, and lower income shares, maybe 20, and then balance the finances of that. So in this example, that works out to be 933 for the high income shares, 800 for the mid income shares, and 600 for the lower income shares. So you can kind of, you can really play with those numbers you could make your lower income share a $300 share and your higher income share more expensive, or you could have a $300 share that's only for 10 members. And, you can just kind of play with those numbers, but really with this sliding scale, you build it out ahead of the season, knowing exactly how much the share is going to cost and exactly how many members in each of those tiers you need to sort of balance it so that as a farm, you're making the same amount of money over the course of the season. Just like the last slide, this has many of the same naming conventions that you should consider, or sort of privacy conventions that you should consider, and communication. Similarly, you want to really be able to communicate with your members about which share they should choose. This is a fun, I don't know, this is an interesting way to build in a little bit of accountability for yourself as a farm or as a nonprofit or something, whoever is selling these shares, to really, like, in this model, if you say we're going to have 20 lower income shares, then you would really need to get those 20 lower income share members. You've really set a target for yourself. And so I think in a way this can be really helpful. You could have it be half lower income shares. You can set those numbers however you want. But this is a way of sort of really ensuring that the farm gets the amount that they need, but that you have really targeted goals for each income level. And then you have to manage the inventory a little bit, right? So if 50 people join immediately at your, thanks Chester Egg, at your mid-income level, then you have to close that inventory and not allow anybody else to join at that level. Does anyone have questions about that? It's like, maybe that seems super intuitive. It's a little bit mathy, but I think maybe it works. And then you might ask, like, what are the income levels? So there are a couple of tools out there. MIT has this living wage calculator that's is it by zip code? Yeah, Michelle's giving me a nod. That's by zip code. So you can look and say, like, based on where my distribution is or based on where our pickups are, this is like what it costs to live in this area, and kind of look at those numbers. This is really, I find these tools endlessly fascinating. Like, I could spend so much time being like, what is the average living wage in Wichita, Kansas? But it's kind of a really useful way to see, not just based on what feels right for you as a farmer, but based on actual data. So the MIT Living Wage Calculator is one. Pew Research has also an income calculator that has ranges. These are linked, but I can send them out also in the slides. It's actually by county, Michelle says. Thank you. The US Census Bureau is also supposed to have a really good tool for this, but when you go to that website, it's just gobbledygook. Like, it's just like ASDF, ASDF, ASDF. So it's not working right now when I was making this slideshow, but maybe something's slightly broken and it'll be fixed later. That seems like it would be a really good resource. Like, and the internet has said, this is a great resource for this, but it's not currently working. And so those are based on just income, right? Like hard numbers. There are a lot of other ways of determining like tiers that are not based on income, that have a lot more to do with lived experience and where people see themselves. So I think we'll have a slide on this later, but there are just a lot of other ideas that I think can be helpful to mull over. However, those then tend to take a little bit of introspection on the part of the member too. So for what it's worth, maybe you want to encourage that introspection, or maybe you're like, I just want to create a like number that is clear. And I will also, before I move on to Rocksteady, say like I am seeing these tiers in lots of other places in my life too. I think this is increasingly true. So my kid goes to summer camp because what else would he do all summer? And his like YMCA summer camp has 3 different income tiers, or maybe just 2 that you, and it's super clear. It's like if you make less than $50,000, you're in this tier, and if you make more, then you're in this. And so it's kind of cool to start to see where else are we seeing those kind of accessibility considerations work out. So yes, of course. And also his summer camp is super cool. YMCA, I love you. Okay. So one of the farms that's doing such an awesome job of this is Rocksteady Farm here in New York. Rocksteady is a vegetable farm, has also been a flower farm in the past, is cooperatively owned, is really rooted and has very clear missions around social justice, food access, farmer training. They're doing great work. And Rocksteady, they're like BIPOC farmer training. They're like very a queer owned farm. It's just, they're like, yeah. So anyway, super love them. They offer a number of different sliding scale options in their community. So they have 4 different payment tiers. They have a payment plan that has different options. They also have low cost or even sometimes no cost solidarity shares. So just to back up one sec to say, like, they have, maybe low income, mid income, and high income tiers. And then there's a tier that's just like, ask us about these solidarity shares. So they're still saying, like, if this low income amount is like still too high for your family, ask us about the solidarity share. And sometimes those are even like no cost entirely. And then they also accept SNAP Online. They have very interesting pricing guidelines, which I would recommend checking out on their FAQ page, that are not based on specifically on income, I don't think, but on like, are you supporting other people outside of your home, or are you are you living with a lot of student debt? Are you, I don't know, like just a lot of, also, did you go to school? Did you go to college with and come out with no debt? Like, I think those kinds of questions are really useful for helping compare what it looks like to live on $50,000 for one person versus living on $50,000 for another person. I think that can just be a really interesting assessment of how you are. And Rocksteady also acknowledges the work of a number of other firms that have been working hard on sort of this same social justice work. Underground Alchemy, Soulfire, Radherb, Third Root, and Kula Center. Some of those are linked there and can be linked out in the sort of notes for this presentation. I'd invite any of you to ask me questions about that, although it seems like probably some of those should be answered by Rocksteady themselves. Does anybody have questions about that kind of work before we move on to EBT? Cool, I'm not seeing anybody come off mute. Oh, Carla G, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for providing all of this information. I did join a little bit late, so I apologize if I'm asking something that you already explained. But my question is, how do I, or what is the process? Like, how do I know their income without making, families uncomfortable, or what type of documentation, or if I have to ask for any of those things so I can, put families or people in these tiers, I think is how you say it. Yeah, that's my question.
So that's a great question. I didn't cover that. I think that's a really great question. I don't know of folks who are asking for any hard documentation. I think that for tiers, it's often like providing enough providing clear enough guidelines that a customer can choose which tier they think they belong in, and then trusting them to choose the right tier. There are, as far as like contact us if you need financial support, that style of financial accessibility or accommodations for members who can't pay the full price, I think that tends to be a little bit more of a conversation, where sometimes it's just the person says, I would like a lower income share, and the farm says, okay, great. Like I think that can be the whole conversation. You could ask for some level of documentation, but I don't think that feels like us saying anybody wants to either ask or provide. With EBT, it's a little bit different, right? Because somebody needs to have EBT benefits. And if they have EBT benefits, it already like you already know that they should be receiving, or they would qualify for a lower income share. So that's like a little bit different. And sometimes we'll talk about EBT more, but a lot of farms will dramatically discount their EBT shares that are EBT only, knowing that that is sort of automatically built in, a built-in tool for understanding which level of where a family would fall in income levels. I got a thumbs up from you, so I'm going to think, great, that we got that answered. So you may all be very familiar with SNAP and EBT, but SNAP is a supplemental nutrition assistance program. It's administered by the USDA, and it provides benefits to families to help with their food budget. This is an incredibly widely used program. It is probably the single most helpful thing that helps lower income families feed themselves. And then the EBT card is the actual benefits that are provided on a credit card, a debit style card, and it has a security PIN. So that's a quick, you may have already really known that, but just for anybody who didn't, sometimes we use those phrases, EBT and SNAP, a little bit interchangeably, but I think it's helpful to know exactly which phrase means which thing. EBT is electronic benefits transfer. So accepting EBT benefits or SNAP for CSA. So this has not always been easy. This has not always been easy for so many different reasons, which, in terms of it's not always easy to market, but also it's just not always easy to accept the actual benefits. So there are electronic card readers that are like a credit card machine. So some farms get that electronic reader. Of course, that needs, I think for those have to have some level of Wi-Fi or access, they have to be able to access to do the card reading. Farmers markets also sometimes have those EBT readers. So there are some farms that have CSA shares, but that maybe piggyback on the EBT reader that's held by their farmers market. Fairly recently, the USDA has really worked to try to make it easier for folks to accept SNAP benefits online, and GrownBy is the first platform to accept SNAP benefits online, or SNAP online. So we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then a lot of farms that have an EBT specific share, so that they have gone through the process to either have a card reader or to take SNAP online. So now, and they have customers who are ready to pay with their EBT card, they might subsidize that share through donations or through other funds, like state or regional funds that can make that share much more affordable. Sometimes, half price or even less. So GrownBy is the first online platform to accept SNAP. This just makes this process so much easier for customers and for farmers. So for a customer who has purchased something using their SNAP benefits on GrownBy, they just have to, the day of their pickup or delivery, they're triggered to enter their PIN, and then they're charged on that day. It's easy to do refunds. It's easy. It's just like much, you don't have to have a card reader. You don't even have to see your customer in person, which I think is one of the things that could sometimes make that a little bit complicated. If you had an offsite pickup and it was managed by volunteers or something, there just don't have to be as many folks involved in that process. Also on GrownBy, you can make an item EBT only, like a share that has been subsidized, so that only customers who are checking out with an EBT card can purchase that share. There is an application process to become authorized to accept SNAP online, like there is with the card readers themselves. And so we can link to that process. Then, of course, this is not just for CSA shares, right? So there's some special stuff to know around using SNAP for CSA shares on GrownBy, but also customers could just buy carrots or could buy milk or whatever else you are selling on your shop and use their SNAP benefits also. So it's not CSA specific. Do you have questions about that, about using GrownBy in that way? And then to move to like getting into the sort of even more complicated areas of ways of making a CSA share more affordable, there are funding programs, and probably the most talked about, most easily recognizable funding program that helps sort of double EBT money for produce is Double Up Food Bucks, which works in, I think, 27 states. Some states it's called, like, I think Texas is called Double Texas or something like that. But so they have all kinds of, that is like a big program. But there are many programs doing this. There's like a number of them in New York. Michelle is here. We have a couple of folks here with us from Glynwood today. And Glynwood has a CSA as a SNAP program. Do you want to mention anything about that, Michelle?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Kara. Yeah, so just that we at Glynwood run this program called CSA as a SNAP, which is one of these GusNIP funded programs that Kara was mentioning. And so we have funding for farms to provide a 50% discount on shares that go to SNAP customers. So that means that you as a farmer would get the full price, or the price that you would like for your share, and then your customer can pay half price and we pay the remaining 50% to you. Yeah, and there are lots of details about how that works that I won't go into right now, but if I will actually put a link in the chat to the program so you can learn a little bit more about it. And if you're interested, you can email me, and hopefully we'll have an online interest form in the near future. But we'll be accepting new farms into the program this fall for the 2025 season. Right now, we're working with 15 partner farms, so we're looking to expand that to 30 over the next couple of years. So, yeah.
And the region for that is the Hudson Valley, right?
Yes, only the Hudson Valley. And then it's also worth mentioning that Field and Fork Network, which runs the Double Up Bucks program in New York State, also is specifically working with CSAs. And so there are a number of other programs around the country, notably in Oregon and Michigan, that also specifically offer these programs for CSAs. And then there are lots of other Double Up Buck programs that provide matching support for SNAP in farmers markets and other direct outlets.
Thank you. Yeah, And it is different. I think Chester Ag asked, is it the same program as Fresh Connect? No. I will say also New York City has its own distinct non-New York State version. It's like there are lots of programs funded by GusNIP around the country that could be, depending on your region, used for SNAP or used with CSA. There's also lots of produce prescription programs. So there's lots of so there's lots of different, different options like that. In addition, there's stuff that's not GusNIP funded, like I think that NOFA Vermont's Farm Share program is not. Thank you. Is not a GusNIP funded, but also is specific for CSA shares. So again, like the CSA SNAP project that Michelle was talking about, the NOFA Vermont one is like half price. So it sort of, a customer pays a certain amount and the program doubles that for the farm. Someone asked, do people need to apply? Yes, there is an application process involved in all of these, and the farm also needs to, I would imagine each farm needs to be authorized to accept SNAP benefits also, right? So that is its own process. Since that, Carla had another question also. Do people need to, or 50% off the full price of the share, or does the farmer need to do that? It's a process to set it up with the program that's offering that 50% off. But the goal, certainly the goal of CSA is a SNAP, and I think of many of these other programs, is to make sure that the farm is getting the amount that the farm needs to, be profitable and sustainable and successful, but also making sure that a customer can afford the share using their EBT card. And then grants. So what we just talked about could be seen as a grant, or something. I think grants is like just a pretty general term, but there are also farms that apply for like independent grants to make their shares more accessible. That can be kind of time consuming, right? Like you as a farmer have a lot of hats already, and one of them maybe is not usually grant writer, but maybe that's a skill you have. Maybe there are grants available in your region that you're excited about. This is, I think, grants to make CSA more affordable are often smaller or more local or state organizations. This might be an agribusiness development organization or something like that. You can also sometimes work with a local nonprofit or a member or your members and other like committed folks to your farm to work on a project like this, to try to take some of the responsibility off of the farm for doing the work and of applying for a grant, because that can be some work. We definitely also see this working great for folks that have that find grants that work really well for that work really well to make their shares more affordable and make the farm successful and financially accessible to lots of customers. This slide is sort of boring looking, but I think is also important to say. So we've gone through all of these different methods that one might use to make a CSA share that is available to consumers at many different income levels. And then that is all the back end work of making the share financially accessible. And then you have to sell the share to a customer. Thank you, Michelle. So I don't think that marketing lower income CSA shares is a like, if you build it, they will come idea, right? You don't just say like, we have lower income shares and then just leave it at that. It doesn't always work so smoothly that way. I think farms really find that they need to do more targeted outreach to make sure that their shares, that this opportunity to get maybe even a half-priced CSA share is like reaching the folks that they really want to serve. So that can involve targeted outreach through community organizations or local partnerships. There are folks who do ambassador programs where there's like someone in their membership that goes out and like talks to their community. I think, Michelle, you guys have done some of that, right? But, you know, just having the share available and like advertised on your social media is probably not going to cut it. Language accessibility is a first step. So if you are, that it's not the case in every community, but it could be that the shares that the community where you're marketing your shares has, uses a different language than the farm. And so making sure that your materials are available in that language is a first step. Also, it's only sort of a step, right? Like, is your platform accessible? Are your recipes accessible? Is your newsletter accessible? So all of those things are things you want, like ideally in the best case scenario, you want to consider how you can make those the most applicable. And I know Vanita's on this call, and we have talked a little bit about some of the struggles about doing this. Like, are the crops that you're growing the crops that a specific community, like if you're selling into Sunset Park, Brooklyn, like are the crops that you're growing the crops that those community members are most excited to eat, or do they know how to use them? Is that what's familiar, desired, etc.? So I'm saying all of that to bring it to the forefront. Also, I don't want it to be like, oh, if we can't do it the absolute best way, we shouldn't try at all, right? Like, I think there's the balance of being like, we're going to offer something that's more financially accessible, even if we haven't figured out all of the other pieces as a farm. So up there. There's also a real hot CSA debate, like, is calling your share a CSA the most understandable and accessible way to pull in new members? Like, that's a phrase that means something to some of us, certainly to all of us in this call, that means something, but is that going, like, is a member just walking down the street going to have any idea what that means and understand how that works or would work for their family? Maybe not. Maybe there's something better to call it. We don't have a clear answer on this. Like, obviously, if we knew the other best thing to call it, we'd already be calling it that. But, it's something to think about. One of the marketing things that to kind of keep in mind is that if you're offering a SNAP share, some of the rules for your CSA might be a little bit different than if you're offering credit card payments. So some of that language that we use about like sharing the risk of a CSA might be not actually the rules that you have for members who are paying with SNAP benefits, because you can't actually ask them to continue to pay for a share they're not receiving, for instance, if they missed a pickup or if you messed something up. So that's another thing to be thoughtful in the way that you're marketing and the rules that you're putting out into the world. So I've just talked for 53 minutes, which it always feels like it goes by in a flash, but I'd love to know if you have questions. You can come off of mute, or you can put your questions in the chat. Some questions have been asked, and thank you, Michelle, answered in the course of this conversation. But if there are others, I'd love to hear it. Or if you're like, oh, what about this other thing that Kara didn't mention in her slideshow? I'd love to hear that too. I will I will put, let's see, we have the steps to getting SNAP certified to sell, to do SNAP online with GrownBy. I'll put that in the chat. Anybody? Go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, thank you so much for this information. I'm currently I'm part of this farm in the Bronx where we are an indoor farm and we are growing, we're expanding, we're choosing what's best for the community, for us. So we all win. And definitely it looks like marketing plays a huge role for all of these. So I'm wondering if there is any type of maybe a link or a document that you guys can share where I can find links in it, or so I guess what I'm trying to find is to not lose track where I can find either people that are volunteering for to give help to farmers, or towards this same the CSA share everything that you've been teaching right now, so we as a farm can expand and can have more access to information. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
I'm not sure. So you're looking for?
I'm looking for maybe a document or a link, or even if you guys know an office, or let's say if I need to find someone that can partner or can volunteer to help us grow the CSA, because we are a very small farm, and in a point we did have 40 shares, but now we are like down to below 10. So I think it's depend by season. When it's like summertime, people go out. So, and then because we are an indoor farm, and then when it's winter, they come out and they want the things from an indoor farm. So sometimes, like as I am growing too, and I'm learning, it's like sometimes I don't know where to go to find maybe access to people that will give information, so I can learn more about marketing, or I can learn more about the CSA or GrownBy, or so.
Yeah, well, you're in New York City, so I would say to reach out and know about Just Food. Just Food does CSA work in New York City, among other things. Also Grow NYC, which is in New York City. There is a CSA Innovations Network, which is national and has some really cool workshops recorded and recordings for information, and are just like a good place to think it's great to receive their newsletter. And some of that is sort of helpful from a marketing standpoint. So recently they like unveiled some templates for CSA renewal season. Yeah, like that kind of stuff is just really helpful. It's helpful to have someone making templates that you can put your farm name in and share with customers. So those are, and Glynwood is a resource in New York. I think there's not, go ahead, Michelle. There's not one great answer is the answer, but Michelle?
Yeah, just, and I was also thinking, Kara, about ambassadors that you mentioned earlier. I think starting with your membership, Carla, you mentioned you have 40 members right now. I think if you have like specific marketing asks, you could reach out to those folks, maybe offer a discounted or a free share if people are willing to offer some support for specific things that you need, like help with a newsletter or reaching out to other potential customers, since you have that network already built for you.
Yeah, I think it's true that as farmers, we don't always lean on the community of community-supported agriculture to ask for things of the membership. And I think it's remarkable how, when asked, people can really step up to help out. So whether that means making a flyer or asking their friends or translating something, or, you know, all the things that your membership probably has skills beyond what any one person can have. Thank you. I want to respect everybody's time. It's 2 o'clock, so this is when we are aiming to leave. We do have many other workshops still coming up. Today's was this first one on the schedule, but we have one all about marketing. Although marketing is a hard nut to crack, so we do have recordings from the previous events on our YouTube channel. So you can view the last 3 there, and this one will be up when I make it available on our YouTube channel. And also, and I just posted some links, and one of those is to our website that has the Farm Generation CSA and NYC guide, and there's a workbook about ideas about how to do CSA in New York City. So Carla, that I think hopefully will be really helpful for you, but I think is applicable to growers all over the country in different ways. So thank you so much. I'm here to talk to you about GrownBy if at any point anyone has more questions about that, but also I love to chat about CSA, so I'm here for that too. And thanks for joining us. It's so awesome to see so many people interested in this topic out of all of the topics. So thanks to you all.